Hey everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Blind Spots. This is the series where y'all get to vote out of 4 movies that I've never seen before. Y'all vote online, and then I review it, and I talk about it. So this month, we're talking Fight Club, David Fincher, 1999, with Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. Edward Norton is a liability claims agent who can't sleep. He's disillusioned with his life. And on one of his trips, he meets this eccentric soap maker played by Tyler Durden. And throughout their friendship and their bonding, they invent this thing called Fight Club, which is a way for men who feel, I guess, disillusioned or emasculated by society and consumerism, blah, 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 blah. They have their place to kind of release their energy and sort of wake up out of this numbness in their lives. And then the movie takes a detour from that and gets more insidious, and this one is kind of a clusterfuck. The way I'm going to do Blind Spots, or at least I'm going to try this out for now, there's a writer called Matt Zoller Seitz. He writes for RogerEbert.com, and he does this episode on like 30 minutes on blah blah blah, so where he gives himself 30 minutes to just write about a topic. And whatever comes out of his mind, stream of consciousness, that's what he's going to do. So that's kind of what I'm going to do for Fight Club. I'm just going to, with the remaining minutes I have here, go kind of on a stream of consciousness, talk about this movie, some of the things I found in it, some of the reasons I haven't seen it, etc. This is weird because this movie is a t-shirt movie. You know, there's this t-shirt with all these famous, what's it called? With all these famous spoilers in movies. And of course this one has one of the biggest spoilers in a while, you know. And look, spoilers galore for this movie. I'm going to talk about it, so what have you. The big spoiler for this one is that Edward Norton, who is befriending Tyler Durden, turns out Edward Norton is so sleep-deprived and just whacked out of his head that he has invented this alter ego, this persona, Tyler Durden, played in his head by Brad Pitt. And what's weird about this movie is that when you come in knowing the twist, turns out the twist is actually, like, that does not prepare you for what this movie's gonna be. Because I thought this shit was just about fighting. Okay, like, you see Fight Club, you're like, oh, they start a fight just so they can, I don't know, what have you. Just so they can kind of, like, get their energy and their frustration out. But no, this starts turning into a movie like, I think the way I described it is like, you remember that American Dad episode where Stan can't sleep, and so when he passes out, then like good Stan takes over and starts doing crazy eccentric good deeds. Imagine that movie, but for like MAGA kids. And it's this weird look at how somebody, when, you know, they kind of not necessarily know what they're doing, but what they let themselves do it. It's like watching the Manson family being recruited for 1999. You know, it's this guy that's able to kind of exploit the sort of I guess, the sort of mental issue of the time. I don't know. It's not like Trainspotting. Trainspotting attacked consumerism in that way too, but I think Trainspotting had, instead of, you know, burning shit and just, instead of this crazy anarchy, you've got people doing heroin. But in this one, it's almost like consumerism is the government, is the law, is the man, and so what Tyler Durden and everybody else are doing is trying to kind of re-opt that through their own sort of fascism, which I thought was actually really interesting to see how this slowly expands, where something that is basically like a support group, a place where you can just be free and not have to hide in kind of like polite company. You can kind of say what's on your mind. And when you offer that kind of safe space, people can coerce you and manipulate you into basically doing whatever the hell you want them to do, whether it be, you know, and I think the parts I really like about this movie, because I'm not, like, totally crazy about it, but the parts I really love about this movie are the more absurd parts, whenever Tyler gives everybody a homework assignment to go out and, like, pick a fight with people, and just they're spraying hoses, they're, like, punching people in the face, they're, you know, tossing them on their ass, like, that kind of stuff is so Looney Tunes and vaudeville and slapstick. I mean, if you want to talk vaudeville and slapstick, Edward Norton's doing this great bit when he's, like, fighting his boss, and he's like punching himself in the face and throwing himself into glass shelves. It's reminded me of something like Evil Dead 2. And Edward Norton, man, that dude, I think this one proves that he's one of our best actors of this generation. Because that man commits, and he is not afraid to, like, toss himself and really, like, bug out and get weird. And he's one of those dudes that can kind of inhabit the nuance of a character like this, somebody who's not quite on either edge of sanity. You get when he's going crazy, you also get when he's kind of vulnerable and not ready to kind of, not ready to fully commit to going crazy and blowing up buildings and shit. One of the things I also like about this movie, and it's kind of tied into one of the things I don't like, there's a certain energy to the first hour of this movie where there's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of plot. And it goes by at a quick pace. So at the beginning, you're kind of trying to catch up with this world, but after an hour in, it kind of just gets dull. And there's something about just kind of the plot, like, this is what's doing here, this is what's doing here. It's very matter-of-fact in the way it's laying out all the pieces of this puzzle for you. And it's not until you start getting to the actual fight club being built that it kind of brought me back. I was like, oh, okay, this is, you know, the reason I came, this is the reason I bought this movie, this is the reason I'm here, da-da-da, let's go. But I found that it kind of went in those moments where there's a lot of things being explained, a lot of things being set up, and then it gets kind of boring. And then it kind of picks up with something absurd and kooky, and then it kind of goes back down again. And I didn't really like the pacing of it, but at the end of the movie, it kind of works like a jigsaw puzzle. You know when you start to work a jigsaw puzzle for the first time, you get like 500 pieces, and you don't know what the fuck to do with them. And after a while, you start, like, constructing your favorite part of the puzzle. You know, maybe it's the happy puppy that you really liked on the cover. Like, oh, I'm building this puppy, and I can kind of start to see this point. This is really cool. But then you gotta go and build the edges again, and you gotta do, like, the weird swatches of, like, green and blue that don't quite make sense. So when you get near the end of the movie, all the plot crap that came up, I found myself plugging in again and just going, oh, okay, this makes sense based off of this, and this makes sense off of this. Like, I didn't understand what the fuck the soap was about until he said dynamite. I'm like, oh, okay, dynamite. Like, this is why the front cover for this movie has soap on it. I'm like, okay, this is kind of neat. Like, I didn't expect this kind of detail to make sense in this way with the plot of the movie. Sidebar here, is it funny to me that the fat that they get from the liposuction company looks exactly like the topping I used to use for butter at the movie theater? There might be something sketchy going on. Maybe movie theater butter is not the butter nor the oil topping that we all expected, okay? Maybe we're getting that amazing, like, California fat, what have you. Oh, there's no water in here. Oh, look, it's a mug with my cat deal on it. Something else that, whenever you know the twist going in, it's kind of interesting to see how dialogue reveals itself, how Helena Bonham Carter's performance is affected by that. She's, like, really weirded out by what he's doing, but in a weird way, she's, like, one bad Tumblr post away from being, like, my edgy ex-high school girlfriend. And, although it was something that I feel like I could have picked up on somewhat early, due to just the flashes in Edward Norton's head. He gives you a lot of time to say, you know, when you're dealing with insomnia, you don't know what's real. And so whenever you see, and this is a really cool effect that Fincher does, I don't know how he does this, but he's, like, bringing in these, like, time-lapsed pictures of Brad Pitt into the fray, and you can tell that it's like his outfit. So you can kind of start to piece together pretty quickly that, you know, Brad Pitt is not a real person, that he's popped up in his head. Just because the way that Fincher shoots it, like, they're never in the same room, there's some certain details that just don't really make sense and kind of come out of nowhere. It definitely feels like something created by a crazy person. And Brad Pitt, man, Brad Pitt, this is probably his best role that I've seen to date. This dude is just purely on fire. You want to talk about that scene when he's talking to Lou and he's losing his damn mind as this, like, mobster type is fucking beating the shit out of him? He's going crazy. Like, in an ideal world, Brad Pitt could be the Joker. I could see it. Based off of that one performance, I think it'd be a really interesting turn to see Brad Pitt just, like, completely lose his damn fool mind. And, you know, this was the pretty boy surfer guy, and yet now there's, like, blood just pouring down his face. It reminded me of that one movie, 31, by Rob Zombie, the speech that Doomhead had where he, like, stares directly into the camera. That's very much resemblant of something in the scene where he's like, "We are the all singing, all dancing crap of the world." You know, that kind of stuff is just really fun to just see these characters, these actors commit to these characters and go full blunt on it. Shit. Okay, one of the problems I did have with this movie, though, is that it very much feels like a Rob Zombie movie, in the sense that some of the dialogue is so obtuse and kind of flowery in its vulgarity that it kind of loses the effect. And then, I mean, there's part of me that's thinking, okay, well, if I'm dealing with characters who are basically, like Edward Norton says, 30-year-old boys, they're stuck in their kind of like boys will be boys, trying to regain that special sense of like old school masculinity, then it kind of makes sense that they would be talking stunted. You know, there's this line that Helena Bonham Carter says that it can only have been written by a dude, where she's like, "I haven't been fucked like that since grade school." And it's one of those lines where you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? But in this kind of world that everyone is trying to just beat the shit out of each other as amusement, as like a lot of like happy-go-lucky fun, then yeah, it does work. And extending that kind of like boyish, giddy, and excitement to basically tearing the world apart. And there's something very cartoonish and Looney Tunes about the scene where they fucking blow up the ball and roll it into a fucking coffee bar. It's something like out of Tom and Jerry, but it's that there. Even the ending, even the ending, whenever Edward Norton and Helena Bonham Carter are sitting in the fucking in the building and watching the other buildings fall down, are those miniatures? It looked kind of odd the way they were falling down. I was like, this kind of looks like an old sci-fi movie with like little models, and you know those movies are like Saturday morning matinees from the old days. So it kind of, again, makes sense in the tone of this world. I think it might just be for me that the pace was just a little too slow. Maybe when I watch it again and I know what's going on, maybe it's one of those movies that like I can start piecing together things really quickly, even better than before, and maybe it'll speed the movie for me. There are some movies like that, like The Revenant. It was like 3 hours long, and the more I watched it, the faster that time went for me. So maybe that's something like this here. I love Fincher's use of insert shots. I think I noticed that. It kind of came off like if you're listening to something like Deftones, where the lyrics are just evocative of mood, evocative of atmosphere, like that scene when they're, I think, introducing The Office, and it's just like quick shots of like the coffee machine, and I think there's like the desk chair, you know, reports. You really get a sense of this world. There is a lot of narration and voiceover going on, but the narration is explaining the character. The insert shots and the way it's kind of choppy and giving you brief flashes to kind of give you an impression of what this world is like, that's kind of the, I guess, the fun of something like this. So, I'm gonna wrap it up here. That was like 15 minutes of consciousness, and I don't know if y'all got anything out of that, but hey, it's an experiment. So, let me know what you thought of this episode of Blind Spots. Ultimately, I would say I like Fight Club. I think after thinking about it for a while, you know, it's still a little slow, but I think it's one of those movies I might have to give a second watch to fully, like, land on the whole, like, this is either a really good, really smart, well-directed movie, or this is kind of just overplayed. Right now, I kind of am on both sides of the fence. I can see either way. I will say, though, the one thing you can't take away, David Fincher knows how to direct this shit. Because if anybody else were trying to grab all these pieces together, maybe Nolan could do it, maybe Scorsese could pull something off like this. But, you know, this is one of those movies that, like, if you just try to put all this shit together by yourself with no idea of what's actually going on, you're gonna go crazy. So, I respect a lot of David Fincher. So, I respect... God damn, this stream of consciousness thing sucks. I like David Fincher movies. This is going to be one that I like, and I'm actually glad I own it. And that cool little... I'm going to show you again that cool little steelbook that I got from Walmart the other day. I thought we owned this on DVD, and if we do, then, you know, I'll donate it. But, you know, this steelbook is actually pretty neat. So, that's it for Blind Spots. Let me know what y'all think of the show down in the comments. Just kind of let me know any suggestions or ideas for this show that I should do. That was it for January. Those were the Film Bro classics, as I mentioned. And for February, I'm going to be pretty basic. Valentine's Day, it's about love. So, the movies that I've selected that y'all can vote on in the comments, in Facebook, and Twitter, and Instagram are Pretty Woman, The Notebook, The Princess Bride, and Sleepless in Seattle. Never seen any of those movies before. They're all about love. And next month, you're going to hear me talk about one of them. But which one? Y'all got to vote. Y'all got to let me know what y'all think. I will tally up the votes and let you know, I think, by the end of the week. I usually give those polls a week to run. And at the end of the week, I'll let you know. And then I'll just watch the movie and film the episode. Gonna try to get better, more consistent with this kind of thing. That's it for Blind Spots. Thank you very much if you stuck to the end. Like, share, subscribe, all that shit. Like I said, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Vote on the poll. And as far as movies that are coming up, I think the only one I'm really, like, super committed to is Happy Death Day to You. But I'd also like to talk about Velvet Buzzsaw, and I'd also like to talk about the Lego Movie if I get a shot. I also have to see 6 of the 8 Oscar nominees for Liam and Mine's. I don't know if that's a word. Liam and Mine's Best Picture Showcase. So, until any of that stuff happens, again, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate the support and love, and I'll see you later. Bye.